Welcome back. Well, we heard a glimpse of what is in store for the United States and the world when or if Biden assumes the presidency in January. But what does it mean for progressives fearing a return to Obama-era corporate bailouts and drone warfare? Joining me now from New Jersey is Rolling Stone's Matt Taibbi. Matt, thanks so much for coming back on. So I've got to ask from the top, if Biden has won, why is so-called mainstream media and neoliberal society in the United States so angry about litigation just running itself out and getting the most accurate result for their candidate?
For a long time, the storyline that Donald Trump may not willingly leave power has been such an appealing storyline for a lot of people in the news media that his refusal to concede and to go through this legal process, which I think is just going to play itself out, and he's going to end up leaving, and it's not going to result in anything. But, it's like a lot of bombshell news stories in the last 4 years that they want to milk every bit of sensationalism out of it. And the idea that he might not leave is thrilling to and horrifying to consider for a lot of
what
audiences.
Is it, a Hollywood mentality? I mean, obviously, 40 million people in the United States will not be able to eat tonight without your SNAP food stamp program. Does that not concern these people that are conjuring up this sort of political thriller on January the 20th?
Well, again, what leads the news is dictated by, a handful of people in New York, Washington, and LA who run the biggest news organizations. As we saw, once again, with these results, the press and the political class have a bit of a disconnect in terms of understanding where most people are in this country. So, yeah, it's not surprising.
And when it comes to the existential threat, say, of climate change, all these people celebrating a Biden victory, what do they think is going to happen vis-a-vis fracking under a Biden presidency?
Well, the assumption that you get from Democrats when you ask about that issue is, well, no matter what, he'll be better than Trump, right? Which is kind of the blanket response to almost any policy issue when you get right down to it. But there isn't a whole lot of evidence in the background of this type of Democrat that's occupied the head of the party since the Clinton years, that they're really very strong on environmental issues, and they're always going to listen to their donors ahead of other people on issues like that.
And is it just hopelessly naive for anyone watching from the global south, this interview, that if Biden was an African leader, he might be at the ICC for colluding in wars that have killed, wounded, or displaced tens of millions, and that could be the president of the United States in January?
Well, I think any American president could be brought up on over issues like that. I think it's only the preeminence of the United States as a military power around the world that prevents that kind of thing from happening. Biden's role in a lot of those wars that we've had over the last couple of decades, again, to most Americans, it's inconsequential because the larger issue is he beat Trump.
Okay, more specifically, the drone strikes that Biden pioneered and the reports of 90% civilian kill rates. Will we see a return to the kind of mass drone strikes? I know that Trump also was a fan of drone strikes, specifically in Yemen, when, of course, Obama was supporting the Saudi bombardment in the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, so I wrote a couple of features about drones, and I didn't really start doing that until the Trump years, because I was covering finance before that. But the drone strikes did go up under Trump. If the people who are rumored to be going back into the national security establishment end up taking those places, I think we can assume that there's going to be some continuity with the Obama-era policies, which is where the drone program, the lethal action programs, as they like to call them, I think they're probably going to continue, and we just won't hear about them very much because the press is not likely to pay a lot of attention.
Trump clearly thinks he's won. He's reshuffling things at the Pentagon with one advisor who wants troops out from Afghanistan, from Syria, wants maybe cooperation now belatedly with Iran, it's being rumored. Do you think, say, for Julian Assange, who's in prison just a few miles from this studio, his best shot is Trump to release him before January because Biden called him a high-tech terrorist?
Yes, although, again, why Trump wouldn't have done that before the election is kind of a mystery to me. Trump, unlike his predecessor, Barack Obama, who used the Espionage Act to go after, I think it was 10 different leakers during his presidency, he really only unholstered that law with Julian Assange. And though he publicly flirted with the idea of pardoning him, he never did it. I doubt that Assange is going to get a better deal under Biden, although it has to be said that the Obama administration hesitated to prosecute Assange formally when Obama was in office, and it was only Trump that took that step.
But, of course, Chelsea Manning was being tortured under Obama.
Right. Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah.
What is this progressive left that is pushing Biden that we certainly hear on right-wing talking points? Michael Moore, the great filmmaker, has been tweeting about Kamala Harris. Can we assume that Vice President Harris will not now be advocating the locking up of innocent people for prison labor like she did in California?
Well, have to remember who the president is. I mean, Joe Biden was one of the primary authors of the 1994 crime bill, which was a kind of signature moment in the history of mass incarceration in this country. He certainly didn't have the reputation of being any kind of advocate for criminal justice reform heading into this election cycle. The political winds have changed somewhat, and both Harris and Biden have adopted the pose of people who are going to be on the side of criminal justice reform. But I think looking back at their history, it would be unwise to expect that to happen.
Well, that'll depress a lot of progressives. You're in the armpit of America. What are you detecting from, say, people like AOC and Sanders as shots across the bow, as warning shots for Biden-Harris?
First of all, just a word in defense of New Jersey. I don't think we're the armpit of America. I love this place, but no. Look, a major subplot of what happened in the last election cycle was, the kind of dismantling and neutering of the Sanders opposition. They were in position to win the nomination. Sanders was the leading fundraiser, which was a tremendous political development because it was a proof of a concept that nobody thought was possible, competing without corporate money. And yet Sanders in the end was beaten rather badly, and he performed worse than he did in 2016, which has taken a lot of the sales out of that movement. So, we don't see a whole lot of evidence of that coalition putting pressure on Biden yet. They might, but so far we're not seeing a whole lot of that.
I should just say I meant armpit, not pejoratively. I was thinking of industrialized labor, the Patterson silk strike. You wrote I Can't Breathe. And of course, Black Lives Matter began with the atrocities against people of color under Obama, Biden. Did they use the movement to get power, or will we see defunding of the police?
I don't know. I don't think that Joe Biden is particularly a fan of defunding the police. I actually don't think most Americans, frankly, are fans of defunding the police. I think almost everybody agrees that there has to be a significant reform of police. Are we going to see a whole lot of that? It's hard to say, but a lot of those issues are at the state level and not federal, so it'll be difficult to enact it, from the White House.
So they're not going to constitutionally change that. You mentioned, I suppose we'll only know about it from the journalists that are good enough to cover it, and arguably the journalists have been good at covering the human rights abuses by the Trump administration when it came to immigration and so forth. How sure can we be that these elite journalists are going to be covering violations of the UN Charter that are enacted by Biden-Harris?
I think it's certainly my primary worry about what took place in the last 4 years and what we have to think about going forward is that the press has changed radically in the United States during the Trump era. We've seen a shift towards most corporate news organizations essentially being proxies for the Democratic Party, and they justified that on the grounds of we have to oppose Donald Trump. But now the Democrats are going to be assuming the White House. How do you go back to being a press that challenges people in power? I think it's very, very difficult to take that step once you've taken, the step backwards into a more politicized media.
Netanyahu, Trump's best friend, has congratulated his other best friend, arguably, Joe Biden, on winning the election. What is going to be U.S. policy vis-a-vis Israel, and how will that impact on any possible Biden policies on Iran, on Afghanistan, on Syria, crucially?
Again, I just don't think that there's going to be a significant change or deviation from the kind of standard neoliberal policy, the democracy promotion, based foreign policy.
So it'll be different to Trump, because obviously this Trump advisor is saying we should get out of Syria.
Well, the Syria hawks are probably going to be much more empowered under a Biden administration. I think the relationship with Israel is going to remain preeminent there, although there is a progressive movement to, stand behind the Palestinians somewhat in the Democratic side. It's not enough I don't think, to tilt the policy of the Democratic Party, not yet. So I just wouldn't expect a major change there. I do think that Syria, there's going to be more aggressive posture towards Syria than there was under Trump.
And Trump, of course, he expelled Russian diplomats. He destroyed the START nuclear proliferation, non-proliferation treaties. He put troops on Russia's borders. And Biden still said Putin has to pay. So another existential question, arguably. What do you think Biden meant by Putin has to pay? What's he going to do?
I would expect the Democratic Party, once they occupy the White House, to undertake a series of measures that will be largely performative in terms of looking like they're standing up to Russia, whether that's, in Ukraine, whether it's expelling more diplomats in retaliation for, what they're going to call election interference. But fundamentally, the people who are coming back into power are the same people who, over the course of 20 years or 20 or 30 years, including a period when I was living in Russia, sought to have some kind of a relationship with Russia, often to combat terrorism. So I don't think it's to be excluded that there will be a softening in relations. I think a lot of the tension with Russia was largely based on it was political as a means of getting at Donald Trump. And now that he's out of power, maybe things will improve on that score.
Matt Taibbi, thank you.
Thanks very much, Ash.
That's it for the show. We'll be back on Monday, 18 years to the day, since the first case of SARS was recorded in the Guangdong province in China, known as the first coronavirus pandemic of the 21st century, that has taken nearly 2 decades to reach the same number of deaths worldwide as COVID-19 has in less than a year. Until then, join the Underground by following us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and SoundCloud.